Welcome all students, and I especially thank Dr. Nahid and Dr. Sana Miss Sana, to accept our invitation for the event. For the students of the course of modern political ideology, they already know that this particular session is aimed at having an interactive session with the students, answering all the questions related to feminism in your minds, any queries about the theories and its application in the society of Pakistan. For those who've just joined, we believe in academic freedom, and we believe in making education a practical matter rather something bookish. So one purpose, one objective of the session is to make you understand how to apply theories, because it's an ideological or theoretical subject, how to apply the theoretical knowledge you've gained to practical realities or political realities of your life. So for this, I first request Ms. Sana Rizwan. Ms. Sana Rizwan is an urban and environmental planner working at the intersection of all things cities, inequalities, and climate. She is a grassroots organizer for housing justice and gender equality, and her praxis integrates research with advocacy. Sana is a Fulbright scholar, and she received her educational training from Stanford, Habib, and Arizona State University, and was awarded the American Planning Association's highest award for a graduate students. She serves on the board of the Climate Action Center and teaches at the Habib University in the Social Development and Policy Program. I request her to please join us on stage. And there is a lyric or a stanza. मज़ा कहने का जब है एक कहे और दूसरा समझे. So it'll be good if you guys can maintain some silence and try and focus on what we are to say. And then obviously it will be your turn to say, and we'll be on the receiving end. We'll hear and we'll try and reply you. Our second speaker needs no introduction. You already know her. She is Dr. Nahid Malbari. She teaches as an assistant professor at SZABIST University, and she's also the cluster head of the sociology at the SZABIST University. She's an author, she's a poet, and a researcher. Her main research areas include gender studies, leadership, culture, history within the domain of sociology. And her PhD, her doctoral thesis was on Firdausi Sikandar, a hermeneutics phenomenological study. So please, Dr. Malbari. So the format for today's session is we'll begin with a panel discussion. I have a few questions to discuss with the speakers, and then the house will be open for a question and answer session. Again, I remind you that despite the freedom I maintain during my course in my class, I expect the students to be academic. I expect the students to not pass any personal comments, no jokes, nothing controversial. Politics is always controversial, so you can definitely ask controversial questions, but try and maintain a very academic tone in your questions, and try and be brief. Don't ask a whole essay because that's what we usually do. So try and write down your question and ask that. Thank you. Okay, so the main objective or motivation behind the session was because we often come across during celebrities interviews or any public forum, we often come across this discussion whether you're a feminist or not. And the usual answer is that I am a feminist, but, and then there is a whole phrase and a whole essay after that. And then similarly, there's usually an answer that I am not a feminist, but I believe in this and this and that, and which actually is feminism. So my first questions to both of you is, how do you define feminism, and do you consider yourself to be a feminist?
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for being here. I feel like your professors ne aapko yahan mandatory bithaya hua hai, but I do appreciate your attention and your just conscientious behavior right now as well. So I'm not sure why Dr. Fiza has asked me here, specifically me, but I know that you all probably have things in your mind as well about so gender equality पे बात होती है, women empowerment पे बात हो रही होती है, feminism क्या है, and एक बुरी चीज़ है तो है, अगर वो बुरी तो क्यों बुरी है. So I would encourage you to ask whatever questions you have, because for me this is just an opportunity to have a conversation, to answer things factually and base them in political truths and just address all of these concerns. So feminism मेरे लिए क्या है? Feminism, आप ये इंटरनेट पे अगर गूगल करें या चैट जीपीटी से भी पूछे, आपको सेम जवाब हर जगह मिलेगा. It's a movement for gender equality. It's as simple as that. And that's exactly what I understand feminism to be as well. So if you believe that no matter what you're born as, you should have equal opportunities in this world, and that your dignity should not be impacted by the assigned sex that you have at birth, you are a feminist. It's pretty much usually about that. Feminism itself, in its history, is it's not complicated, but it is varied. Depending on the part of the world, you will meet a different kind of feminist, people who practice it in a different way. So you have liberal feminism, you have socialist feminism, you have Islamic feminism, you have neoliberal feminism, you've got girl boss feminism. Different किस्म की उसकी अपनी varieties and branches होती है. So the kind of feminist that I would say I'm an intersectional socialist feminist. I believe in class equality. I believe in understanding हमारे जो ethnic differences होते हैं या religious differences होते हैं, उसके साथ भी हमारी gender जुड़ी होती है, and we experience it in a different way. So that is how I would qualify my feminism. Also understanding the politics of it and the way that people in Pakistan understand feminism. Maybe if I meet someone, I will not introduce myself as a feminist first, because no one wants to talk to a feminist or hear what they have to say about feminism once you've revealed yourself that way. But of course, the hidden agenda and the obvious agenda should always be justice and equality. So that's what I stand for, and that's what I practice. So of course, I would say I'm a feminist, to those of you who understand what I mean by that. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, feminism is is a term that is very much a pariah term in Pakistan, because whenever somebody speaks about feminism or says that they are feminist, it is sort of looked down upon in all aspects of life. So, but feminism is a very, very important element for social justice, social equality, and it is not a term that needs to be denounced very often as it is in our country, but it is it's a term that needs to be celebrated. So for me, feminism is about equality, about rights, about the ability to work, about the ability to do whatever you want, travel, study, have family rights, have divorce rights, have a lot of other rights. So feminism is basically a multifaceted aspect. There are tons of feminisms in the world. Liberal feminism, which basically means that they speak about rights on work and health and certain other issues. Radical feminism is a very important term, which today in Pakistan they abhor is basically any mention of radical feminism, where they feel that women are much more powerful than men, or that kind of scenario. But for me, feminism basically means to be able to be who I am and to respect both men and women. And if there is injustice, especially towards women, towards girls, towards children, that would definitely make me a feminist. So I would regard myself as a feminist on all areas of life. Thank you.
So already you've briefly answered it, but just to emphasize this point, often I came across this argument that feminism is a Western-oriented ideology, because obviously the history is of the suffrage movement in the UK, in the US, so we often feel that it was something for the West. We were already treating women in a perfect manner. And so there is no relevance of feminism in our society, in a Muslim society, or perhaps in a Pakistani society. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What's your point on that, opinion on that?
Could you just ask them separately, because those are, so what is the first question you would like me to answer?
The main question is that is the theory relevant in our society?
Definitely, the theory is very relevant. You know, feminism as we know it today is something that the West initiated basically many hundreds of years ago, but the basic movement started in the 1800s. And from the 1800s, you had the first wave feminism, then from 1880 to around about 1950. Till the Second World War. And then from the Second World War, 1950 to about 1980-ish, 70s, let's put it, you had the second wave feminist movement. And then you had the third wave feminist movement. Nowadays, people are saying that, okay, we are in the fourth wave feminist movement with the Me Too movement. But it's part of the third wave of feminism. This is Western feminism, though its roots are much, much older. But let's be very honest. If we take our part of the world, for example, if we take the part of the world that we call Asia, feminism was not a concept that was, nobody thought about feminism in that way. If we take Iranian culture, the Persian culture, there were women warriors, even during the BC period. And I'll give you a little story that one of the kings, whose name was Xerxes, he lost a war, and only one battleship that was manned by a woman was able to pass through with his war against the Greeks. So he stated that my men have become women, my women men. So it's not something that was looked down upon, because in that period of time, women earned and they got their payment in our part of the world, in the East. And they commanded armies, they commanded cities, they were artisans. So, but with the period of planned settlement, conquest, the medieval period and all, women's rights basically all over the world got a, I would say, it was in a way not an impetus towards their equality. Forget superiority, towards the equality. And if you take the Marxist concept, they say that women first received their downfall because of land and property, and therefore because property was in a way usurped by men, women were marginalized and they became second-class citizens for the first time. So during the axial period, which predates the normal historical period. So, so basically it has nothing to do with feminism. Women had a lot of rights, even in the ancient world. Islam gave a lot of rights, but it is more to do with patriarchy. So here comes the question, what is patriarchy? What is domination? So archy basically means domination. Patriarchy is domination of men over women. Matriarchy would be domination of women over men. So it's a question not so much of anything else, but the possibility of domination that created this, this distance between the two genders, between the two sexes. And that battle is still being waged, not just in our country, by the way, but even in the Western world. Even today, battles are being waged there, too. So I think it has a very, very long and complex history. And to understand it, we need to go back in time to see the roots, to see what caused these differentiations. And if you take Pakistan, the movement of women is not something that is new. It is pre-partition, and from partition till today, women have been fighting for their rights, women have been asking for their rights, and to a certain extent, slowly and gradually, we've had our ups and downs. We get our rights, then somebody takes them away, then again we get some more rights, and so on and so forth. So the struggle is keeping on going on. So I think that gives a sort of a brief outline of what it is. Any other?
So that was a big history lesson, and I think the only thing I will add to that is कि अगर आप समझते हैं कि feminism एक western concept या कोई साजिश है ऐसी, तो साजिश नहीं है, लेकिन जो concept है, it's a modern concept. But that's also because we live in modernity. The gender roles that we are born into today are modern. आपके जो पढ़ना है उस तरीके से brought up नहीं हुए जिस तरीके से आप brought up हुए हो. It's very simple because the way that we live in modern society means we're following modern society's rules. Modern society, what is modern society? You are born to work, you are born to go and earn money, and you are told to do it in a certain way. तो इस तरीके से gender roles work के basis के ऊपर divide हो जाते हैं कि औरतों को घर पे रखो, उनसे वहाँ पे काम कराओ, मर्दों को बाहर भेजो, उनसे वहाँ पे काम कराओ. काम की ही बात हो रही है. But this is a very recent way of living. We did not always live this way. It's not even 100 years old sometimes. The division of labor did not work this way. पहले सब लोग सारा काम करते थे. Men or women, and including children, everyone had a function to do. And it's modern society which makes work outside of the home, कि कहीं दूर जाके काम करना होगा. And then you isolate the work environment to the home and you remove the domestic sphere from the idea of labor. कोई अब डोमेस्टिक लेबर हम बोलते हैं लेकिन आप सोचते नहीं हो कि घर में काम क्या हो रहा है. पूरा दिन काम हो रहा होता है लेकिन आप उसको काम नहीं समझते हो, बिकॉज आप उसके लिए पैसे नहीं देते हो. एंड क्योंकि वो जो काम है, अगर आपने जिस दिन उस काम के लिए पैसे देना शुरू किया, आपको पता होगा इसकी वैल्यू क्या है. लाइक आई थिंक अबाउट दिस कॉन्स्टेंटली व्हेन आई वाज लिविंग अलोन during my masters, and I had to cook for myself and clean for myself, and then make sure all my furniture was there and all my bills were paid on time, and then I'm also doing all of my studies and doing all my extracurriculars. जितना time लगता है उन सबको करने के लिए, that's true labor. It's constantly there. So just because you're paying for one of them, you're valuing one of them. And then that's where ये equality की बात आ जाती है. Because इसके अंदर it's not about, like, feminism isn't just about women's rights. It's about gender rights. So it doesn't matter what gender you're talking about. It's also about acknowledging the humanity and value of every person's labor and understanding where that aspect of inequality comes from. Why is it कि आप बोलो कि लड़कियाँ यहाँ पे नहीं पढ़ सकती, या उनको सिर्फ इतना तक ही पढ़ाओ, या उनकी जो डोमेन है लाइफ की सिर्फ इतनी होनी चाहिए, उनके ख्वाब भी सिर्फ यहाँ तक होने चाहिए. Why? This is modern society, these are modern concepts. So feminism is a response to these modern concepts. It's a form of resistance to oppression, क्योंकि gender roles oppress करते हैं. It doesn't liberate you. It really doesn't. If I've been told from the beginning कि I can't do so many things, I would want to resist them. And I was born in this. For example, my father is a pilot. And when I was younger, I once said कि मैं भी pilot बनना चाहती हूँ. And all of his pilot friends were like, ऐसा तो कभी नहीं हो सकता. And I was like, क्यों नहीं हो सकता? मैं स्कूल में बहुत अच्छी हूँ, मैं पढ़ सकती हूँ, मैं पायलट बन जाऊँगी. They said, तुम्हारे बच्चों का ख्याल कौन रखेगा? I'm like 16 years old. मेरे कोई बच्चे नहीं हैं. लेकिन कोई imaginary एक दिन बच्चे होंगे जिन्होंने मुझे अभी से कैद कर दिया है. And I'm like, Father, you have children. You are still flying. If I have children, why does it mean I can't fly? So I'm saying that this is a very small anecdote, but I'm sure you all right now can think of 100 more in your own personal lives as well. So that's where the importance and relevance comes in. You know, you don't have to go outside of the city. हम लोग बात करते हैं जैसे कि देहात में एक अलग किस्म का, you know, culture है जहाँ पे वहाँ पे equality नहीं है, या यहाँ पे तो आपको सारे rights मिले हुए हैं. It's not true. Workplace में जाना and the kind of income you're able to earn, but then also the kind of culture you have to like go through. I don't know how many of you work outside of your classes over here, but you know that all places, corporate ho ya otherwise, have a certain culture that you have to go through. Is that a place where all genders, everybody can thrive? It's not. It's still not. Women have only recently in the past decade fought for policies and laws so that they don't have to suffer the kind of vile harassment that stops women from working. Because if the only thing people value is someone with money who can provide for themselves, even those aspects, those avenues are blocked to a certain gender. Why? It's inhumane to do that. And then the issue is so the first wave feminism that you just spoke about, first wave jo feminism thi, US and UK के अंदर was about the right to vote. It was about suffrage, कि औरतों को भी हक होना चाहिए वोट करने का. And उस वक्त जो ideas आप सुनते थे इसके ऊपर कि और like women are just so stupid and so silly, they can never vote. They are not intelligent enough to choose leaders. We now have prime ministers and presidents who can be leaders, who are women, but at that time you couldn't even vote for a leader, right? So that was a very obvious kind of discrimination. आपको पता है कि ये एक discrimination है that you can visibly see. Then when you get the right to vote, access to voting, access to institutions that allow you to vote, education to vote with absolute enlightenment or illumination of what the policies are, it becomes more and more difficult in that way. So for example, if you look at the US specifically and you look at black communities वहाँ पे, उनको अभी भी ये बोला जाता है कि अब तो तुम आज़ाद हो. You are not a slave anymore. You can work, you can own property, you can do all of these things. Stop talking about racism. And it's harder to talk about racism when people are telling you, but tum to azad ho. White people are constantly saying कि तुम क्या ये अपना रोते रहते हो कि you are being treated unfairly, there is racism. There is no more racism because we can't see it anymore. And it just gets harder the less obvious it is. It's more insidious. Yes, you can own property now, but how easy is it for you to own property? How many women over here are given their due share of inheritance? Wealth is created through generational wealth. जिसके पास घर है, वो आगे जाके उसको rent के बारे में नहीं सोचना होगा. You don't have to spend that much money worrying about something like that. You can build wealth. Wealth begets wealth like that. So in the same way, rights beget rights. कि अगर आपके पास पहले ये freedom थी movement के लिए, you can go on and do that. So if you're boys, for example, and you've been told the world is your oyster, आप कुछ भी कर सकते हो. What do you want to be when you grow up? Anything. And you've never been told it's not possible. You've also never been told that you have to do it twice as hard. कि आपको उतनी ज़्यादा मेहनत करनी होगी. आपको बाहर जाके काम करना है, fine कर लो. लेकिन घर में आके भी काम करना होगा उसी तरीके से. You aren't expected to take care of children that you are birthing. You are not expected to do all of these things. These define your gender roles, right? It also takes humanity away from men. And that's one of the biggest problems. I'm not the kind of person who feels like कि जहाँ पे oppression हो रही है, you also have to talk about the people जिनके खिलाफ बात हो रही है. अगर मैं black लोगों के हक में बात कर रही हूँ, मैं ये नहीं कह रही कि सारे like गोरे लोग गंदे लोग हैं. लेकिन मुझे अब उनके बारे में बात करनी होगी क्योंकि they have power, so they will be obstructing the conversation by saying कि नहीं ऐसी बात सच तो नहीं है, बस हो गया ऐसे करके. So when you talk about women's rights, some men feel very attacked. ऐसा तो नहीं होता, ऐसा तो नहीं होता. मैं बैठ के बात करूँगी नहीं मर्दों के साथ भी बहुत बुरा होता है, उनके साथ भी अच्छा होना चाहिए. I'm talking about the same conversation, but it's also important to understand who the actors are, who the oppressors are, who is oppressed, and all the intricacies of that. So feminism is absolutely deeply relevant. It's also embedded in our culture. I see women resisting all the time. I see, and अगर आप उसको बोलो नहीं कि वो feminism है, उसका ये मतलब नहीं होगा कि वो उसकी spirit में नहीं है. So some people may never call themselves feminists, and that's perfectly fine. It does not matter to me what you call yourself. It only matters if you are behaving well with your fellow human beings, if you're not doing gender discrimination or sex discrimination in that way. So I would answer it that way.
Just adding on what you briefly mentioned during the answer, is feminism relevant for the males of the society as well? And what benefits can they generate from this discussion over gender rights or gender equality?
Well, feminism is very relevant for the men folk. As she rightly said, that if we don't teach our men humanity, something is lost from within them. They lose themselves. They lose the love, they lose the family atmosphere, they lose the happiness. That is very important. So for men also to understand feminism is, I think, a very, very important concept. for a male child to be brought up to be rude, crude, and to say that, he has no feelings, to be told that, you don't have to cry when your father has passed away or some such thing. Those are things that make them, in some ways, inhuman. These are very human emotions. And we are teaching our younger generation, our younger men, not to be loving or caring about anything. They have mothers. Young boys are very attached to their mothers, mind you. So what are we telling our youth? That, okay, as a young kid, it's okay for a boy to be very attached to his mother, but once you become a little older, please stay away from everybody else, and that you don't need to show the same emotions that you had. And this is a concept which takes away their humanity. So I think it's very, very important and very relevant for our menfolk to understand feminism is not something that they should be ashamed of. On the contrary, it gives them, their daughters, their wives, their mothers, various rights, their sisters various rights, which otherwise they would not know. When I teach in a class, I tell them that, does your sister have these rights? Do you want your daughters to have these rights? And they all say yes. So feminism is very important for all the menfolk of our country. It leads to less violence. It leads to understanding. It leads to having better emotions, and to rightfully direct those emotions in a way which will lead to enhancement of social integration, of social equality, of social enhancement. So these are very important tools to learn. Emotional intelligence also comes within that same framework. The more feminist a man is, the better emotionally intelligent at times he would be, because he would be able to work in various ways, in more innovative ways, I would say. So I think feminism for menfolk is equally important. My father always used to say one very important, or rather my grandfather, that I'm happy that I had daughters. Because it's much more better to have daughters than to have guys. Daughters obey us, daughters love us, daughters take care of us when we are old. And men will have their own families and life. So, for him, he was a feminist. So I would say that understand, and the mothers also have to teach their sons. We feel that, okay, certain housework is considered only the female domain, like khana pakana, kapre, to iron your clothes, to pick up your shoes, to get a glass of water, or to give you somebody to give you a glass of water. This is all a woman's domain. I don't think it's a woman's domain. I think men need to do all that so that they can be functional. And in our society, we sort of restrict men from doing any household chores, saying that if you do a household chores, you are not a man anymore. I think many of you all face that, right? But if you go abroad, everybody has to do everything. So I think it's very important to teach menfolk that appreciating the different ideas and ideals of women, to appreciate the different ideals of men, helps in integration, and therefore there'll be lesser strife, lesser wars, lesser conflict that we already are seeing on a day-to-day basis in our society. And it is important to tell them that women also need space and need a life, because it would make a better home life for the family itself. They feel that, okay, women's job is just to stay at home and to give birth to children, and that is their role, because that is how the ideology keeps us, in that same element. But for me, it is very important that we teach our boys first, and then sort of go on to teach the women, because women are, in a way, the slightly oppressed group in our society. They face a lot of problems, harassment, and so on and so forth, abuse, domestic violence, you name it, they have suffered and they are suffering. And though there are laws, laws can be a million laws, but how do we implement, how do we, make people understand those laws? It's by encouraging them to understand the different issues that are there in our society. So I think it's absolutely important that menfolk also understand what feminism is.
I'll qualify this further with examples from, again, because as a feminist, one of my practices is the personal is political. And maybe if you read Audre Lorde and other such feminists, you'll understand what that means better. But, you know, the highest rate of suicide in the world is it's for men. Men are more likely to commit suicide than women, than any other group actually. And this is across most countries. Any country, you will see this. Because like I said, we're joined. You know, capitalism, patriarchy, these are global systems at this point because of the way that this global trade works. But we all are following a very similar culture at this point. Doesn't matter where you're at. Of course, there are variations, but it exists. So the fact that more men are likely to commit suicide is very troubling for me. Why are more men feeling isolated and lonely? What is it that's pushing them to take their own lives? This is a crisis. This is a crisis. And it's a feminist crisis. The reason why this happens is because, like, I keep tying this down to humanity because it is. ये आपकी इंसानियत होती है. What are all of the factors that actually motivate men to not seek community? To have all of the burden of the family finances on them, and then to not even be able to share their problems, their grief, whatever is eating them up over there. This is a feminist issue, and men don't talk about this. People who are afraid of feminism will not talk about this. People who haven't kind of deconstructed all of the gender roles that they have to subscribe to, or all of the barriers that they have to express themselves or feel their own humanity, this is what they go through. So I care about the fact that my brother feels that he is completely alone over here in caring for his family, or if my father feels this way, or if my friends feel this way. So, and the only way that I see their humanity or something that's making their life better is when the world is more feminist. Because that means that you are not restricted in the opportunities you have, but also in the way that you behave every day. ये आपकी daily basis के ऊपर बात होती है. Family structures, the way that they exist right now, they also keep that community from you. They kind of tie you over there. So अगर आप अपने दोस्तों के साथ हर रोज़ रात को चाय पे बैठ रहे हो, it doesn't mean कि you're actually talking about the things that you need to be able to talk to. You might be talking about nothing for a very long time. And that's not giving you the communal support that you need. It only comes up when you've deconstructed certain things enough. It allows for better friendships, it allows for better relationships. So yeah, of course, feminism is deeply relevant to men over there. So I also did say that I don't like to center men in conversations when it's about oppression, because I need men to acknowledge where they're at. So, and I also want to talk about privilege over here, because ye hamesha, it goes hand in hand. I think we always have to acknowledge our privileges. If I am a Sunni upper class woman in Pakistan or in Karachi, I have a lot of privileges over other people. And it doesn't make me feel defensive in any way. If someone who is Shia or Ahmadi or someone who is Hindu or Christian ever wants to talk about their rights in Pakistan, and I stand over there saying, nahi, nahi, aapke paas ye to hai, why am I talking like that? Why am I denying basic reality in that way? So I would rather talk about their issues over here. But in this conversation, once again, like I said, the dominant group wants to be talked about all the time, so we'll talk about men over here in feminism as well. And I invite men to consider the reasons why they're kind of maybe trained to, instinctively hate feminism or talks on gender right, कि आए हाय वापस शुरू हो गई औरतें अपने रोने लेके इसके बारे में. But like I'm saying, it's deeply relevant to all of that. Another thing I'll say is that, when it comes to rape, for example, or sexual assault, it's not a conversation that should only be centered on women. When men suffer these things, men haven't raised the voice in the same way to change or create policies that would also acknowledge the violation that they face. It is feminists who've actually changed the law to include men. Feminists always consider all. That's kind of what feminism is about. Like I said, it's about gender equality for all.
So now we are starting the question answer session. Try be brief and relevant. Please introduce yourself and then ask the question. Raise your hand so I can know.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Zarmeen Zafar and I'm a student of social sciences. This is my third semester. So I have one question that's mashallah really good that everyone is talking about women's right. But why in our society no one is talking about men's right? I was just searching about men's right on Google है और वो कोई जवाब ही नहीं दे रहा था उसमें मतलब मैंने जब सर्च किया तो मुझे वुमेन मैन के राइट्स ही नहीं पता चल पा रहे थे वाई एवरीवन इज सेइंग वन सेंटेंस दैट यू शुड गिव रिस्पेक्ट टू वुमेन है क्यों कोई ये जुमला नहीं कहता कि अगर आप मुआशरे में कह रहे हो सोसाइटी में आप हर चीज़ दो साइड लाना चाहते हो तो आप रिस्पेक्ट के मामले में भी तो दो साइड लाओ आप अगर कह रहे हो कि औरत की इज्जत करो देन यू शुड ऑल्सो से दिस सेंटेंस टू योर डॉटर से कि मर्द की इज्जत करो तो आई थिंक दीज आर द थिंग्स दैट आई वांट टू आस्क
I feel like I was addressing this earlier, but I'll do it again. So the question is कि ये क्यों नहीं कहते कि मर्द की इज्जत करो? Sorry, the question is कि why don't we talk about मर्दों की इज्जत? Right? I think you have to think about it very practically, step by step. First step, who are you told to respect? Who has respect? Whose respect is tied to their clothes? Or the way that they are perfect, girls who can behave well in society. Who are you trained to respect and fear? Who has more money legally and through just traditional means as well? Who has control of resources? Who has the power? I mean, for example, आप में से कौन अगर कोई मसला होगा life के अंदर, you can go and talk to your dad in the same way, गुस्से में, in the way that you would talk to your moms. Like कि आप अपनी अम्मी के ऊपर गुस्सा निकाल सकते हो लेकिन शायद अपने अब्बू के ऊपर उस तरीके से गुस्सा नहीं निकाल सकते So it would be impractical to deny reality where you're born in a society where someone is given more rights. So I don't know who doesn't say कि मर्दों की इज्जत नहीं करो because उन्हीं को इज्जत देनी होती है हमेशा अब I'm a young teacher and some students can think कि like वो किसी भी मेरे male colleague को sir बोलेगे हमेशा or will defer to their judgment about certain things even if I am the expert on the topic. They'll still try to belittle me in some way or the other. I feel like men are given default इज्जत. Some people are. अगर इस room के अंदर एक गोरा होता आप उसको default इज्जत देते. You would just do it. People who have power get it by default. So it's just one of those things that happens. When you talk about rights, you usually talk about it in a context जहाँ पे किसी के पास नहीं होते. When everyone's sitting over here comfortably, you don't have to talk about injustice. We're all very happy and there's no one facing a lack of rights. So I guess what you're Googling, I don't know, because the internet is pretty big and you can find everything over there. But if you are not finding that, maybe it's in a very specific context, because once again, you're talking about women's rights because women are denied rights. Men, like I said, no one's talking about men's rights except feminists. Men don't talk about men's rights. They only talk about it when women are talking about their rights. And they're like, what about men's rights? What about men's day? Ye kya aurat march hai? Why don't men have a march? Why don't men have a march? I mean, I can go on and on about this, but if there are more specific questions regarding like specific anecdotes or incidents, please do ask. I'm not afraid of like controversy or anything like that.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, thank you.
My name is Aruj Beg and I am from the Department of Sociology. My question to you is that who defines the standards of feminism? Which means that recently there are a lot of labels associated with feminism. You're a good feminist, you're a bad feminist. So my question to you is that who has the hegemony on defining what makes a good feminist or a bad feminist?
Well, that's a very, very intricate question because, again, you have to see in which country those terms are being used, whether it's you're speaking in the Pakistani context or whether you're speaking in a Western context. Again, hegemony is basically, through the ages, it has been controlled by men, for men, and with men. So if the men are controlling that narrative, that story, then they would say that, okay, certain aspects of women who rise up against men, or who in a way speak about what problems men create for women, then that would be an issue. So it all depends in which context we are talking about, where we are located. So it's a very, very complex issue. Let me just speak about it in a different manner. When we're talking about power, so this relates basically to power. And power is a very complex system. Power is based on different areas and arenas. For example, power is based because you have wealth, property, because you have a leadership position, because you have a social position. So all these issues need to be first understood in detail. And then we can go on and say that, okay, this person is talking about a good feminism or bad feminism. No feminism is either good or bad. It depends on the narrative which is being constructed. Okay, so no feminism is good or bad. People say that, okay, if a woman is wearing a sleeveless dress, it is considered bad, all right? But that again depends on the narrative, which country that is being stated in. For example, no one would bother about such a comment in maybe a Western society, but it would be a very important element in a society like Pakistan or in any other, developing world where religion plays a very important role, and so on and so forth. So again, these narratives have to be understood from the context in which it is said. There is no feminism that is either good or bad. Feminism is just about equality, it's about rights, it's about making sure that patriarchal structures that are there through the ages are not in any way limiting the development, the growth, the sustainability of women, and that women are given some opportunities in life so that they can live a better, decent, more endurable life. We face a lot of problems in Pakistan. Pakistan is a country that has faced myriad of issues. Poverty is there on a day-to-day basis. Today we see the dollar has gone up and so on and so forth. So people are becoming more and more poor. On a daily basis. So again, these are issues. So now if a family is becoming poor, there will come a time when formerly a woman would not be allowed to go out and work. She will be forced to go out and work. So these are narratives that will keep changing. So now in a family where formerly anybody who went out and worked would be considered a bad woman, now it will be an acceptable way of life because economically, a family now cannot sustain itself on the income of only one gender. It needs both the genders today to work so that there is equitable income, so that children can be sent to school and so on. So the narratives, as I say, keep changing from generation to generation, from time to time. So the bad woman, the good woman, the bad feminist, the good feminist, these are narratives that will keep changing every few years. So there is no one narrative that can be fixated and say, okay, this is a negative narrative or a positive narrative. These narratives we construct, they are all, remember, feminism is a social construction about equality. So these are all socially constructed dimensions of life. And these narratives will keep changing as times pass. I mean, formerly, let's put it, cutting up a body in the Middle Ages and seeing what is inside the human body was considered an offense against God, against the church. And people were burnt at that point in time. Today, all doctors do autopsies and things like that, and nobody's bothered about it. So these are narratives that will keep changing with the passage of time. And we need to understand that there is no feminism good or bad. It is just a construct which is liable to change according to the economic, the social, the political constructs of a particular age, a particular place, and a particular country. Yes.
I want to add to that because I also feel like your question was about praxis in this way. Praxis kya hota hai? It's the way that you just end up practicing your feminism. So do you practice it well or do you not practice it well? That would kind of be the qualifying question over here. And I don't really want to give like a moral component to this. Moral means good or bad. I don't think of someone as like a bad feminist or a good feminist, but I really do judge them for the way that they practice their feminism. What I mean by that is, for example, if someone claims to be a feminist, but then they go on to say something or do something that doesn't really align with principles of feminism, then I would be like, I don't know what kind of feminist this is, जो सिर्फ एक चीज़ के बारे में बात करता है. So for example, liberal feminism really focuses on work, on the ability to earn money for formal work outside of the home, which is fine on its own. But it doesn't consider intersectionality in the same way, क्योंकि औरतें काम हमेशा करती है. कोई औरत है जो काम नहीं करती. I don't know a single woman who doesn't work. She works in the home, she works outside, she works day and night in some form, right? So it's about acknowledging that way. And this is kind of where the waves of feminism also begin to distinguish themselves. So the second wave of feminism, which came after the first wave, was about votes. हमें votes चाहिए. Second wave was about the more invisible things कि ठीक है हम vote तो कर सकते हैं लेकिन day to day life में कोई इतना इजाफा नहीं आया because women can go to university to study, but they can't practice anything. And they can't go to every kind of school or university. So that's happening slowly. And now आप घर में बैठे हुए हो and आपको पता है कि आपकी जो value मिलती है society में आपको नहीं मिलती वो. आप कुछ कर नहीं पाते उसके बारे में. That's where the second wave of feminism comes up, which was more focused on this idea कि women should be able to get the same amount of money for the same amount of work, equal pay for equal work. And it was centered around that. But the third wave, which is the difference over here, was about pointing out the hypocrisy of all the people left out in the second wave, which was कि black women came up and said कि हम तो हमेशा से काम करते आए हैं. But you're not talking about us, are you? It should also be beyond just the ability to go outside and work. I personally don't believe that I exist to just work, and that all of us should only think about working, working, working. Working, what I mean over here is not for productivity to produce capital and to produce like society ke liye goods and consumption ki cheeze, but also I mean things ke what do I want to do in my life, things that fulfill me emotionally, philosophically, spiritually, all of that. So over there, that's where the third wave would come in, where it would look at the intersections. कि यहाँ पे अगर सिर्फ अमीर औरतें अपने हक के बारे में बात कर रही है, तो आप किसको इग्नोर कर रहे हो यहाँ पे? Who is the dominant majority that you're ignoring? The third wave talks about that or looks more deeply into that over there. So for me, bad or good isn't the problem, but it's this case, if you're practicing feminism only for a certain kind of people who look like you, then that's not, to me, the kind of feminism I would want to subscribe to or even encourage. It's more about the way that you acknowledge that. I think then when you talk about the question of hegemony over here, I don't know who will have hegemony in the longer run. White women have tended to have that due to the dominance of their race and positions in the global world order, because they are in the global north, in countries that were formerly colonizers or are imperialist countries, so they keep power to themselves because Hollywood unka hai, unka media hai, we always look over there, so they get to define things for us. I think in the longer run, justice wins. I believe in resistance and the power of liberation that comes through these movements. So for example, right now you will see in the question of Palestine, for example, hegemony was with the Zionist narrative, which said, Israel has the right to defend itself, for example. But right now that liberation and resistance keeps coming up. That hegemony is being taken away. Now people are questioning things more in a way that never happened before. The new generation isn't subscribing to the same values as the previous one, so they will keep asking. And because I think about historic materialism and dialectic materialism, I believe things change over time, and that people who have been oppressed will gain their liberation. We were colonized, we gained independence. किसी ने दी नहीं है, कभी कोई देता नहीं है, आपको लेना होता है. In the same way, the people who are oppressed will gain their liberation. So inshallah, hegemony will shift over there as well. That's what I would qualify it with.
Hello, my name is Shayan. I'm studying in 4th year and I'm majoring in sociology. First of all, thank you both for your time. This was a very enlightening session. And second of all, when it comes to the question, wouldn't you agree that the best way to control a person is to teach them to control themselves, right? So on that, taking that idea, can we extend that to, like, could you please elaborate on the idea of internalized misogyny, especially in women? Because that is quite relevant to us. So thank you.
Well, internalized misogyny is something that we as youngsters have been brought up with. And let's be very honest. Many people in our country have this concept because that is what they've seen from when they were very, very small. So they feel that whatever is told to them, whatever they see their parents, grandparents doing is the right way, and we have internalized it. It has become part and parcel of our society, and that is the narrative that is there practically in all areas of Pakistan, this internalized misogyny. But today with education, one of the main ways in which this internalized misogyny will break, will be diminished, would be through education. And once people start educating themselves, and by education I do not mean just reading or your teachers telling you what you should know. It is the enlightened thinking, it is the critical questioning that is the most important aspect of things. And we need to have students, we need to have people, both men and women, to ask the very, very difficult and the very, very critical questions, so that this concept of misogyny, which is part and parcel of the narrative, I mean, everywhere. I mean, I was just talking to some students some time ago, and they said that even in TV dramas, there's internalized misogyny being portrayed. Let me tell you one thing. In 1979, one of the first films that was released, and this was a man who actually released this film. He was an actor, Rangila, and he spoke about, and he developed this movie called Aurat Raj. And in this movie, the woman was violated. There was domestic violence and so on and so forth. So she leaves her husband, starts off a political party, and that was the narrative of this man who tried to tell women that you have to fight for your rights. Now that movie, Aurat Raj, never got the response that was necessary at that point in time, because of course martial law was there and so on and so forth. But as I said, that menfolk, a man in Pakistan actually made a movie about women rising to power in 1979 at the height of, let's say, a period of time when martial law was very, very strong. So internalized misogyny has to be fought on various levels, on various arenas. And it slowly and gradually, you cannot expect change to happen overnight. A lot of people, men and women, want change in a very rapid succession, that, okay, today we do this and tomorrow we should get all our rights. That is not going to happen. These are slowly evolutionary ways in which you struggle, you keep struggling, every generation keeps struggling, and you get one or two rights over a period of time. And that is what will, in the end, eliminate, or I would never say eliminate, but would lessen misogyny. Because remember, patriarchy, where that domination aspect is there, is a worldwide phenomenon. It's nothing to do with just Pakistan or the East or Islamic countries. It is a worldwide phenomenon. It's in the West, it's in Africa, it's in South America, it's in Asia, it's in Europe, so it's a world phenomenon. So there are forms of internalized misogynies all over the world. So this will take a struggle, this will take effort, and with innovative thinking, with the social media that we have today, each time you feel that, okay, there is something that is internalized in us, we have to ask those critical questions, and that's how slowly and gradually these things will change. So it is more awareness that will create this, this differentiation and will eliminate to a certain extent. Again, it will never be totally eliminated, but will lessen the impact of misogyny that is rampant in some countries. And this is something that we have to address every now and again. So it's not something that will be eliminated in a very short span of time.
Thank you for this question. I think it's really excellent and kind of exactly what I think the biggest issue is with regards to anything when it comes to you seeking for your own rights. आप अपने सबसे बड़े दुश्मन बन जाते हो इस चीज़ के अंदर, right? कि why are you batting for the other team? It's basically a question कि why are you not for yourself? That's the first thing. And when you said the best way to control someone is for them to control themselves, this goes to like what Michel Foucault talks about. When Michel Foucault, as a sociologist, talks about prison systems and surveillance. And एक surveillance होती है जो दूसरे लोग आपकी करते हैं. So आपने ऊपर कैमरा डाल दिया या एक prison का warden है, आपकी teacher है, आपको देख रही है. और फिर उसके बाद एक form of control ऐसा बन जाता है जहाँ पे आप अपने आप को ही judge कर रहे होते हो या police कर रहे होते हो. So even when no one else is there, and other sociologists have talked about this, body hexes from Pierre Bourdieu, etc. It's like, do women naturally sit in a certain way? Do we naturally want to have our hair done in a certain way? Do we naturally want to put makeup on and talk in a girly voice or, behave with these mannerisms? This is eventually how you police yourselves. बचपन में आपको बताया गया था कि लड़कियां ऐसे करती है और लड़के ऐसे करते हैं. And then eventually you start to police yourself even if nobody else is there. You'll behave this way, talk this way, dress this way, want these things. You end up controlling yourself, and that's furthered generally. And internalized misogyny is over here when it's not just gender norms, it's things that are very harmful to you as a person, but especially you as a woman, that you then perpetuate further. So different, I think generations will have different words for it. But right now, you know about the pick me girl, she'll be like, pick me, choose me, boys ke samne she'll be the one like, I think guys are the best. Or I think boys mein drama nahi hota. And wohi hote jo aapke secrets rakh sakte and things like that. That's what internalized misogyny looks like on a daily basis. The one who's like, but what about, I think men, bus. They're the ones who we should be talking about, things like that. And then internalized misogyny also functions different ways, where you police women's sexuality, women's desires. You will then slut shame her, you will call her different names, because why? What has she done that's that offensive to you? It's her life, but you feel constantly that you need to police her. But that's because you're policing yourself first. You aren't allowed to do all of those things, and you believe everyone needs to behave in the same way, so you're policing them as well. That's where you keep perpetuating it. Perpetuating means you do it to yourself, you do it to somebody else, you make sure that society stays that way, in that rigid way. And that is the biggest issue. My issue is never someone who actively hates feminism or hates gender equality. At least they have a stance. If someone who is in power wants to maintain their power, I understand it. Someone who is rich wants to stay rich, so you stay poor. I get it. अगर कोई अमीर इंसान या पॉलिटिशियन चाह रहा है कि आपके पास वो हक नहीं आए जो उसके पास है, makes sense. लेकिन जब गरीब ही गरीब का दुश्मन होगा या औरत ही औरत की दुश्मन हो रही होगी उस वक्त, तो it makes no sense to me, because it's like तुम्हें पता है कि मेरे बारे में बात नहीं हो रही है, ये हमारे बारे में बात हो रही है. It's for all of us. So it makes no sense when someone is fighting, within themselves over here. But it also makes perfect sense because of the way you've been policed and brought up in that way. It's the media you consume. It's the politics you read and you see. You internalize them constantly. And अक्लमंद वही होता है जो इस चीज़ को खुद self-reflection के through challenge कर सकता है. The first fight and the biggest fight is always nafs. It's always you yourself, and understanding how you've been conditioned and programmed to want things to be a certain way and how you do it. It's the most liberating feeling to not care anymore about gender norms dictating your future, your life. If I had always, I just constantly think about this, कि मेरी ज़िंदगी इतनी limited होती if I did subscribe to those norms, right? I would have never been able to travel the way that I do. I would have never been able to do all the things that I love doing because I was told growing up, girls shouldn't do this. Good girls don't do this. And that changes slowly, but the slowest change is the one that comes, from inside over here. So yeah, that is the biggest, I think, not just enemy, but like the biggest danger. And that would be true for either class consciousness or anything else like that as well.
Assalamu alaikum, am I audible? My name is Mohammed Sair, and I'm a student of social sciences in the 3rd semester, and I'll try to articulate my question as much as possible. जैसे डॉक्टर सना ने बात की थी that to some extent एक colonial mechanisms और processes हैं जो कि पीछे से छोड़ के जा चुके हैं. We always wonder about and try and understand कि ये चीज़ें तो set हो चुकी हैं mechanism जिससे हम लोग छोड़ नहीं सकते, but we never question how were they able to do that. And so I would like to connect my question to the debate that we're having. At what point in time did men and women have an impasse? जहाँ पे what were the natural, biological, physiological factors that the men were able to basically overpower or control the women, and the women were not able to basically fight back and resist? या फिर अभी भी हम लोग जैसे मिस मलबारी ने mention किया कि Artemisia के बारे में that she fought Xerxes. So we have examples from history that women are doing things, but then we also have examples from history that women aren't doing things. ठीक है? So is this a transitional phase that we're going through where we can see, or in the near future, that women may come to, there may come a point जहाँ पे women को भी वही rights वगैरह मिल रहे हैं, or is it something कि जो कि continue रहेगा in the form of patriarchy that we're experiencing right now?
Sure, beta. So your question basically saying at what point in time did women start losing their rights? Well, there are different histories. As I say, history is a very complex phenomenon to understand. So if you look at, and today history is changing very, very rapidly with new findings that are happening. But from the traditional norms of what we have read, and if you take the Marxist ideology, they basically gave a period of time. And even if you take from feminist writers, again, there are two variations. So I'll give you both of them. If you take the Marxist ideology, they speak about the time when human beings started settling in cities and states, where they started having settlements. Okay, new cities were being built in Ur, in other areas, and where you started owning property. When you started owning property at round about, let's say 1500 BC, 2000 BC, it is at that point in time that women first started losing their rights, because with property, women became a part and parcel of property. So women and children became the property of the man with the land or the cattle that was part of the ownership. So at that point in time, and there were wars being fought at that point in time, because one clan was fighting with another clan for more property, for more land. So women sort of gave up their rights, their power for protection. And that protection led to them having a slightly lesser position, though their position was not that little, but it became a little less at that point in time. And then once you had slaveries and slaves coming in, the women were marginalized to their homes, the upper class women. Remember, slaves, whether men or women, had no rights. So if you're a slave, whether you're male or female, all your rights are taken away. So we are speaking about the owners and the slaves. So at that point in time, the women of the superior class, the one who were not the slaves, they were marginalized into the home, and the slaves were made to work. Both men and women were made to work on the land for the owners, for the slave masters. So that was one period, and that is a Marxist concept of history. Now, if you take a feminist concept of history, and if you take Karen Armstrong's book, The History of God, she actually gives an exact date. And this is a very interesting element. She gives the date as 1750 BC. Okay, so 1750 BC, when formerly there were gods and goddesses, women, goddesses were there, they were very superior. There was Anahita, there was Isis, there were lots and lots of female goddesses at a particular point in time, and they sort of ruled over the men and women of the world. But once, let us say, a change happened in the philosophy of the world, a patriarchal setup came in, and she gives the date at round about 1750 BC, when women, because their goddessship was removed, then they lost power. So again, it depends upon which books you're reading, why you're reading it, whether it's a feminist ideology, whether it's a religious ideology, whether it's a Marxist ideology. So all of them give approximately, I would say, about 2000 BCE period, at the point in time where certain rights were sort of removed. But for me, I think it was more with settlement, with land, with wars that were being fought for the acquisition of more land, whereby women, for their own, let's say, safety, gave up certain rights. And from then on, those rights were sort of usurped, and it became a dominant element that, okay, now that you've given up your rights, why should we give it back to you? So I would give that aspect a point of time in history where, according to historical records, women lost their equality, not their power, but the essence of equality with settlements, with land. So that is what history tells us. Now, of course, as new history comes about, these are just, as I said, narratives, paradigms that are there. Maybe it is even more further back. So again, as we learn more, we get new knowledge, history can change its course, and we might even have to go much more further back for a better analysis of the point in time. So this is what the narrative is at this point in time.
I don't have a history lesson for you in the same way, but this is just conflict theory and the way that we try to trace it. Okay, what was the first time where some peasant gave up land to be ruled by a landlord? Okay, pehla landlord kab aaya tha? When was it that? And it does go to Marxist theory, and that's kind of where I find my understanding and analysis over here as well. Okay, at what point was the first time when someone gave up their right to either own their land in the same way, to be able to, I mean, agar aap mehnat karte ho ek jagah pe, and you're the ones actually growing the agriculture over there, you're the ones who are feeding everyone, at what point do you have to start paying rent for that? What was the first time? At what point was there a king where you said, okay, we will follow this, this lineage of one family? At what point did that happen? It's difficult to trace the origins of the world in that way because it's very contextual, region by region, and you can find that over there. I also, about your question, are we at an impasse? Are men and women at an impasse over here? I feel like the way that this conversation goes sometimes, or the discourse, just the narrative that exists, it almost makes it feel like for some reason men and women are enemies, or feminism is saying that men and women are enemies, or is pointing out that we are enemies. I just feel like we're natural friends. We're kind of, human beings are meant to cooperate. And when push comes to shove, they do. Some people believe that we are meant to conquer each other. Okay, there will always be someone who is the conqueror and someone who is the conquest. And I don't think that's the natural order of things. I think there are so many complicated social factors that go into this, but I don't see this as enemies looking at each other. I do see it as a violation of human rights when someone is given more privilege than another person simply by virtue of how they were born, based on nothing real. Because gender does not determine intelligence. It doesn't determine so much in what you do in your life, but for some reason it ends up being the most important thing for a wide majority of the world. I mean, so many women can't do things, not because they can't naturally or physically do things, because they've been obstructed from doing those things. And then when you talk about it, of course, this has to be talked about in relations of power, because this is all about power dynamics. So when you talk about these power dynamics, you can make it into something where you're talking about, okay, this is them versus them, or like an enemy situation. Or you can talk about this as just the way that you would talk about any rights violation. Okay, this is a situation of power where one person or one group has been given that, and they have to either relinquish it to save their own humanity, or the other oppressed class will have to take it by force or in any other way that they can. And throughout history, it's been done in different ways. There's also another, like, I want to point out like I mentioned modernity. We are in a very specific era of the world. It just didn't exist like this, but it also doesn't mean कि पहले हर जगह equality थी. Oppression has always existed in some form. I don't think that's a natural way of doing things. It is a way that things have been done. And I also do believe, like I said, that cooperation is possible, and not just possible, it is probably more natural to want to cooperate than to want to beat somebody up and take their rights from them, or to be trained to, hate someone in that way. So it's maybe bringing us to a more natural or organic way of doing things, as opposed to one that's been fabricated, where we've been trained to want to oppress. I just don't need somebody in Pakistan to have their rights taken away for me to have my rights. I just don't think that way. I also don't think that way in terms of religion, ethnicities, or gender. I don't need the Khwaja Sira to be a beggar for them to, for me to feel like I am a real woman or something like that, It doesn't have to come to that kind of an arrangement. These power dynamics are just different. So this is not a total answer to it, because there is no historical point. You can always have कि एक moment था कि फिर ऐसा हो गया, फिर पूरी दुनिया बदल गई. But we don't live in neat narratives. History is very convoluted and very complicated, and it's difficult to trace it in that way as well.
Hello, my name is Umama, and I'm a student of social sciences. Okay, there was this perspective that I came across while reading up on the feminist discourse that was very surprising to me. And it says that men cannot be feminists, only feminist allies, because they lack the specific experience that's unique to being a woman. So is that a take that you agree with?
I don't know. I've thought about this many times, and it depends on my mood, so the answer will change. To dissect the reason why someone would say that, it makes a lot of sense to say it in that way. So, for example, I'm not Palestinian. I believe in the liberation of Palestine, but can I decide for them what they need to do? Like, a lot of people यहाँ बैठ के बात कर रहे होते, and I'm a grassroots organizer. So recently I was a part of a protest that was organized last week. And one of the other people there was now sitting, with his degrees and talking about how the only solution is a two-state solution, and that has to happen. And he is an ally to the Palestinian cause. He is part of the organizers. And I was disgusted at what he was saying. I couldn't believe कि ऐसा कोई कुछ कह सकता है. And then I found out that there were actual Palestinians right next to me. And then I looked at them and I said, what do you want? And they were the best people to talk about their oppression. They said, absolutely not. Only one state is possible, because it is Palestine. That is our land. And you can think about South Africa in that way. People are like, ab kya ho sakta, ab to wo aa gaye, But the land will always go back to the people who originally were indigenous to it and were then violently dispossessed of their land. So they are the ones who will say it. In the same way, when you talk about feminism or women's rights in this specific context over here, men can be allies, and men are allies to their own cause, once again. But will they be able to experience that oppression in the same way? Because it's so small. Some things are so small. For example, itni choti cheeze hoti hai. One time I was walking on the road, and I was walking with a group of friends, and the male friends over there were like, "Tum itna tez kyun chalti ho? Like, why are you walking so fast all the time?" And I didn't even realize I was walking fast. I said, "I'm so used to harassment. कि हमें train किया गया बचपन से कि अपनी सर नीचे रखो, दुपट्टा ऐसे पहनो, ये वो करो." And I couldn't explain until they pointed it out. I didn't even realize I did that. But I also didn't realize that would be a question. It'd be like, of course, this is the reason why women behave in the way that they do. So it's about that experience that you don't have for yourself. That's kind of where it would be at. And then it would be also, okay, once again, if you don't experience it, your personal interests may come up as well. Someone may be a feminist, but only to that extent. कि जहाँ तक उसके rights अब encroach नहीं हो रहे हैं, उसके ऊपर बात नहीं आ रही है, वो वहाँ तक आपका साथी होगा. Are they going to go all the way for that? Can they be true allies in that way? I, once again, don't have a definitive answer for this. I also don't know if I I find this to be as like the question that determines my cooperation with my comrades or my allies in that way. I welcome everyone to the cause कि आ जाओ जितना साथ दे सकते हो उतना साथ दो फिर उसके बाद आगे देखा जाएगा. I don't consider them to be my saviors in the first place. I know कि काम तो मैंने ही करना है. तो जहाँ तक मदद हो रही है आ जाओ, it doesn't matter. उसके आगे inshallah, like the way that you were able to come to this extent, you will also come to like the full extent. But I don't know, just don't think that question in that way keeps me up in the night in the same way when I was younger and I was like, can my male friends be real feminists? Maybe, maybe not.
Any other questions? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Asfaidar. I'm a fourth year student and I'm majoring in IR. मेरा क्वेश्चन मिस सना से जैसे वो कह रही थी while responding to शायान के क्या औरत की दुश्मन है. It reminds me of the moments, women movements in Pakistan. दो movements चलती हैं यहाँ पे, एक औरत मार्च और दूसरी हया मार्च. Both are asking for their rights, but both are sharing a kind of contradictory views. So what's your take on this?
I think this question is not as related to Shayan's question in the way that it is about like good feminism and bad feminism, maybe in that way. Or also in terms of like internalized misogyny over here. You can ask for the same thing in different ways. That's perfectly fine. But I also think that it's not about asking it in different ways. It's also about what you're asking for. I don't know the intricacies of what the Haya March's demands are as such. I do know what the Aurat March's demands are. I've also been a part of a crowd where a version or a group of Haya Marchers were attacking Aurat Marches and stuff. I think, I don't know, it's like, it's also embedded in context. So I'm not going to talk about this as if it's in a vacuum. Haya March ek hai, Aurat March ek hai. Haya March is a response to Aurat March. Aurat March was first. And Aurat March was asking for very specific things. It's defined in their manifesto. They're talking about income equality. They're talking about housing rights. They're talking about the end to disgusting sexual discrimination in the law, where you have like 2-finger tests to determine if some woman was raped or not. You know, it was about very, very specific things. So they had their own charter. And Haya March is like a response to, oh no, the behayai. कि अब वो उनके जो क्या posters होते हैं वो इतने provocative है, and we need our own version of this because Islam तो औरतों को हकूक देता है. But there isn't one hukuk that Islam gives or talks about that Aurat March would deny or say कि नहीं होने चाहिए. They would in fact say कि please let us practice them. It would be more about that. So Haya March, or even the other, there was a Mard March as well, of, you know, Ali Zafar supporters mostly, who came in कि हमें करना चाहिए. So I will laugh at them because they are laughable. I don't think so for example, if they have a very specific charter that they are marching for, then I would probably support their charter in some ways as well. These are people who feel like an injustice has been done to them or they are oppressed by something and they have come to seek their justice. So yes, but what they're asking for is, if it's in response to something that's already talking about equality, is it kind of also meant to suppress then the rights that are being asked for? So like there's no, ये कोई छुपी हुई बात नहीं है कि मज़हब को इस्तेमाल किया जाता है बुरे intentions के साथ. तो अगर अब वो उसी तरीके से इस्तेमाल किया जा रहा है to co-opt the women's rights movement or to say कि हम लोग बोलेंगे इसके बारे में, आप लोग नहीं बोला, आप लोग वेस्टर्न हो या आपका अपना वो आपकी फंडिंग भी अमेरिका से आती है और आपका ये वो है, all the accusations that are very baseless but are made on the daily basis. Like most people will talk about this as if it's like reality or fact. Not one person who wants to talk about this has even bothered to read the manifesto. Like आप बैठ के तनकीद कर रहे होते हो, लेकिन it's like कि अपने आप को इतनी तो इज्जत दो कि आप थोड़े पढ़ के बात कर रहे हो, आप तनकीद उस पर कर रहे हो जिसके बारे में आपके पास इल्म है. So in that way, what I know of Haya March that I can talk about, I don't think it's contradictory to women's rights to ask for women's rights in like a way that prioritizes like the Islamic way. My mom is very deeply religious and part of the faction that would probably be organizing Haya March maybe. And we live under the same roof, and when it comes to gender rights, she has maybe not agreed to things that she now agrees to, because they've been distorted so much कि आप पहले से उसके खिलाफ होते हो कि क्या मतलब है तुम्हारा कि फॉर एग्जांपल लेट्स इवन टेक अ पोस्टर कि खाना खुद गर्म कर लो, जिस पे इतनी आग लगी थी कि क्या मतलब है तुम्हारा कि मर्द खाना गर्म करे अपना वो खुद, क्या मतलब है वो इतना काम करता है उसके लिए तुम खाना नहीं गर्म कर सकते. Once again, feminism, if you want to talk about it holistically, is about acknowledging the fact कि खाना बनाना मेहनत होती है. And also, let's be very, very honest about this. How do men eat their food at home? Who serves them? What are the expectations of food? कि fresh food किसके लिए बनना चाहिए उसी वक्त जब वो वापस आए. I work. Day and night I'm working. But if I go home expecting my mom to make fresh food and also heat it up for me, she will do that because she loves me and she's been trained to do it that way. But if I really respect my mom, मुझे पता है कि वो भी सुबह से काम कर रही थी, तो मैं जाके अपना खाना खुद गर्म कर लूँगी. इतनी मेरे लिए offensive बात नहीं है इसके ऊपर. But people who want to create contradictory or like counter movements to that, what are their real intentions? Is it so that ये हट जाए, support उनके पास आए? If they care about women's rights, let them speak about it. Let them march on it on their own. Once again, I believe there should be mard marches. But for their own rights, if it only come out to counter a woman asking for her rights, then I will laugh at you because it's a foolish thing and it distracts. It's very distracting. It's if the fight is the same, then join as opposed to like create counters. It's very political. It's also like in terms of interpersonal dynamics, it's political. Islamabad में, for example, औरत मार्च भी होती है और औरत आज़ादी मार्च भी होती है. औरत आज़ादी मार्च एक इनकलाबी नज़रिए से देखती है. दे बिलीव इन रेवोल्यूशन एंड दे बिलीव इन सोशलिस्ट रेवोल्यूशन. उस तरीके से दे बिलीव इन द राइट्स ऑफ कि जो मज़दूर औरतें हैं उनको आगे आना चाहिए एट्सेट्रा. औरत मार्च हैज़ अ डिफरेंट वे ओवर देयर. तो उनकी अपनी लड़ाइयाँ भी हो रही होती है कि तुम हमारे मार्च में क्यों नहीं आ जाते, हम अपना अलग से क्यों करें. इट हैज़ टू डू विद लाइक ग्राउंड पॉलिटिक्स एज वेल. सो इट्स नॉट जस्ट ओवर्टली कि आपका एक पोलिटिकल कॉज अलग है, आपकी इंटरनल पॉलिटिक्स भी अलग है. सो जो हाया मार्च वाले इंटरनल पॉलिटिक्स है वो खोखले है. सो उसके ऊपर आई डोंट नो, जिनको वहाँ पार्टिसिपेट करना है वो कर ले, जिनको एक असली बात भी करनी है वो वहाँ पे भी पार्टिसिपेट करे. सो दैट्स माय ओपिनियन ऑन दैट.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Aniza Nadeem. I am a student of social sciences. Feminism focuses on equality and gender equality basically, but my question is about gender flight. When women encroach into male spaces, men tend to leave those spaces. For example, cheerleading and nursing were male-dominated fields. But when women came into that, men left it, and now the value is a little bit lower. It's like white flight, basically, if you know what white flight is. So my question is, how can feminism help with gender flight?
Well, beta, this question of gender flight, it's because at that point in time, there were no female nurses or female doctors or female teachers or female anything. Women were not allowed to go out, right? And during a period of time, when the first nurse, we all know about the first nurse being Florence Nightingale, you've heard stories about that, the lady with the lamp, she was called. And so nursing became, during warfare, because so many men had died, they needed people to actually look after the day-to-day care, where men were not available to do it. So women came into the domain at that point in time. And those areas or those arenas which allowed women to come in, there were very few of them. So more and more women joined those arenas, and therefore men felt that we can go into the other areas of work which were more conducive and which were more productive, as we call it. And so women had to take up and fill those positions because those were the only ones available to them at that point in time. Today, I don't think there would be much of a flight in whichever scenario that you are taking. Let's take teaching, for example. Yes, women teach the lower level students, very much so. But as soon as we go into the main academias, we go to the colleges, we go into universities, you will find that a lot of men and women are working as such. And why less less men are there in, let's say, the primary level schooling is because children are more close to their mothers at that point in time, so they would feel more close to the female teacher as such. So it is again a gendered thing, definitely yes, but it is because at the initial point in time, those were the only few spaces that were available for women, and women therefore in droves joined those few spaces because no other space was available for them. Today, women have many more spaces. They can join more programs, they can join more avenues. But at that point in time, initially, just very, very nominal spaces were given to them to work. And so women went in droves. And therefore, men said that we don't need to do that anymore. So they went into the other fields. So that was the reason why it happened. But I don't think, there will be flights in other areas too with the passage of time. But I think as societies progressed, I remember, let's say, high school teaching, mostly women. Now today you take A-level teaching, there are mostly men who are teaching practically all the domains, even the social sciences as such. So I don't think there will be these flights of men and women in certain areas, and then they'll come back again to it. There was a great flight of men folk in the nursing field at a particular point in time, but I think a lot of men in Pakistan from the rural areas who are getting the first opportunities to work, they are going into the nursing profession. Not men from the cities, but men from the rural areas who are acquiring inter degrees and things like that, and they know they don't have an option to go in for medicine at a higher level. They're all actually opting for nursing in this day and age. So these are areas that will see this flux time and again. So it all depends on opportunities, on class structures. It's more complex than it seems. There are other underlying issues that are there, class issues, ethnic issues, and so on and so forth. So you will have these fluxes, the comes and the goes, as I call it. Yes.
I'm very familiar with white flight. My background's in urban planning, and I studied in the US, so of course over there. So let me also add in a little bit more context about this. So white flight, for those of you who don't know, is कि जब 50s में World War के बाद सारे soldiers वापस आए थे US के अंदर, the cities were now being populated by previously enslaved people or people who had gained their liberation but were not being employed. They were only the only point of employment they would have would be in the south of the US, जहाँ पे वो plantations पे काम कर सकते हैं. अब वो लोग शहरों में आ गए, शहर industrial बन चुका है, and now they're coming to work in that city. So when they come to work in this city, they have to live in the city. Who lived over there? All the white people, because they owned that property. They had the majority ownership over there. Now, white people did not want to live with black people because you were still going through Jim Crow के segregation laws जो भले outlaw भी हो गए लेकिन in practice they were there कि जिस तरह हम लोग भी अभी करते हैं caste base के ऊपर for example you would have कि you don't want to drink from the same kind of glass, you would not want to go to the same restaurant जहाँ पे they would go. So white people didn't want to live in the same areas or neighborhoods where black people could now live. So that is what was white flight. All the white people left the city and created suburbia. तो अब suburbs में रहते हैं वहाँ पे जहाँ पे आपकी अशराफिया होगी. They would have their single family homes, they would have a garden, they would have a picket fence, they would have a car. and they would drive to the city to work and then go back into those areas. Black people could not live in the suburbs. Now, what is the fault over here? Is it the fault of the black person who wanted to work and live in a city? Or is it the deep discrimination of the white people who just thought that black people are so subhuman they didn't want to live over there? In terms of comparing this with gender flight, I haven't even seen I haven't seen the term as much, but it makes sense because it's based on who do you value as a person and who do you not value. Gentrification भी ऐसी ही होती है कि who do you value, जिसके लिए आप अच्छी चीज़ें लेकर आओगे, आप जिसके लिए infrastructure अच्छा होगा, रोडें वहाँ पे अच्छी होगी, school वहाँ अच्छे होंगे, hospitals etc. access वहाँ पे होगा. And gender flight in a way is basically कि what are the things that you value for men, and if women are doing it, is it because the thing is less valuable or women are less valuable? So what is feminism about? It's about giving value to the same level over here. So if feminism is constantly deconstructing all of the things that make you unequal, it's also challenging gender norms. कि ये fields औरतों के लिए है, ये fields मर्दों के लिए है. It challenges that. Some men may want to do things that are dominated or considered only to be like women fields, right? Men who want to be artists, men who want to be dancers, men who want to be performers, men who want to do anything that they say ki only women should do. You're all in the social sciences. Do you know this is not supposed to be a male-dominated field? You'll always see more women over here. So are you less manly? Are you supposed to be that way? Ye question jo hai iske upar, it's about removing that bias from it. It's about making things equal. Nursing is a technical thing. It doesn't have a gendered component to it. It shouldn't have that. So if you value women in the same way, which is what feminism is a movement for, and if you start to question the gender norms that make men behave in certain ways or like once again cordon men off only to certain kinds of jobs, then it liberates men. And this is kind of where we can tie it up in a circle. Okay, if you're liberating genders, you're liberating men and you're liberating women, and anyone can then do something without feeling like this is beneath them because ye to ladkiyon ka kaam hai ya ye to ladko ka kaam hai. Things like that.
So this brings us to the end of the session. Am I audible? Can you please on this? Okay. Is it better now? Ah, yes. Okay, I hope all of you enjoyed this discussion because since you all are going to become researcher, the main objective of this whole course and of the overall education is to make you understand that humans do have variety of ideologies just like their identities. We do tend to be feminist, liberal, or maybe socialist at the same time. What is important is that you try and do some catharsis and try and identify where you stand in the world. Where is your own input comes in? What do you believe in? And that's important as a researcher because once you start going out in the field and collect data, your own opinions, your own identities, your own ideologies and beliefs will influence your interpretation. So if you won't be able to point that out, if you won't be able to identify where you stand, the outcome of your research, the outcome of your analysis of the real world, the political world will be influenced without you realizing it. So yes, I mean, everyone has the ideologies, ideological inclination. You can be feminist, you can be a post-feminist or believe that feminism has no more relevance in this world. Whatever that ideology is, you need to know it. And you need to make sure that it's not influencing your outcomes, your analysis. And you need to compare your findings or interpretation with whatever you believe in. So that was the main purpose, and I hope it was an enlightening session. It was something that contributed to your understanding of what feminism is. I am extremely thankful, a very hearty vote of thanks for Ms. Sana Rizwan and Dr. Naid Malbari. And I would now request Dr. Riaz, the Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences and Education, to please give the souvenir, a small symbol of thanks to Ms. Sana Rizwan. If you can, do we have Sana, please. And now I request Ms. Nahid to please come in front and and can I request Asa for a group photo? So if this can come, and other faculty member, if there are any, please come on stage. Atika, you can please.